Hello everyone, it's Richard Lewis here again with another video. Today I'm going to be doing a follow-up story on the terrible swatting incident that came out of the Call of Duty scene. A bet gone horribly wrong, which you can see my previous video about that for more details if you haven't been following the story. But anyway, I've noticed a lot of the other channels maybe haven't kept up with things that have been going on. I want everybody on my channel at least to know what's been going on, because there have been developments since the awful tragedy occurred. I think the first thing that it's worth mentioning is that the person who called in the swatting that led to the tragic death, the shooting of Andrew Finch, a guy called Tyler Barris, he has appeared in court. He has made his first appearance in court, and it turns out that this sick piece of shit is way worse than perhaps anybody could have even begun to imagine. So basically, Tyler appeared in court to address allegations that he called in the 911 call for the swatting. But they started digging because back in 2016, he pleaded no contest to another case, which was a felony count of a false bomb report, where he was sentenced to 2 years and 8 months in jail. Anyway, he was living with his grandmother at the time, and his grandmother is 62, and she has had to get a restraining order against Tyler Barris because he made constant threats to her. The quote here is "constant threats to beat my face bloody." This is his grandmother who he lived with. He also threatened to kill her multiple occasions. He said he would destroy her home and kill her dogs, and in the end had to move out of the house they shared and stay away from her, stay away from her home, stay away from her dog's workplace, vehicle, and everything else in the restraining order document. And the reason that he had threatened his grandmother, apparently, was because she had said she was going to report these other bomb threats and swatting incidents that he was involved in under the Twitter handle Swatistic. She was going to report them to the police. I mean, absolutely horrified. He's just a grotesque individual. And then on top of that, he has also just said, I'm not going to fight the extradition charges, because obviously he doesn't live in Wichita where the incident occurred, and now he's going to be taken to Wichita to face trial. Now, that's significant. We'll get into why in just a moment. But, another thing that was in the news, which certainly didn't seem to get mentioned very much, when I think it's also of great importance, because, look, there's no doubt that that guy is a sick, horrible individual, but there's still the matter of the SWAT agent, the member of the SWAT team that discharged his weapon, used lethal force against somebody who was just answering the door. Apparently the cam footage that's been released, which I obviously can't show on YouTube, shows that he put his hands up to sort of obscure, because there was shining lights at him. How this is interpreted as a dangerous move, I don't know. I would certainly like to hear from any police officers about how on earth you could possibly interpret that as dangerous, a clearly unarmed individual. And as a result of everything that's surrounding this particular incident, well, the victim, the family's victims, they actually want to charge the officer. That's their focus. Sure, the person who made the call absolutely is going to be held culpable, but they also want the officer that shot the weapon, and it's hard to blame them. You can see here a report by the Associated Press. The family of a Kansas man fatally shot at the door of his home after a hoax emergency call once the police officer who killed him criminally charged for his death, their attorney said on Tuesday. Police have said 28-year-old Andrew Finch was shot after a prankster called 911 last Thursday with a fake story about a shooting and kidnapping at Finch's Wichita home. They said the hoax call was a case of swatting, which a person makes up a false report to get a SWAT team to descend on the address. This is the quote here. You can see this was a letter to the mayor of Wichita from the Finch family. It goes without saying that our family is devastated by what has happened. What cannot go without saying is why Wichita City leadership is compounding our grief and sorrow by keeping my son from us. Please let me see my son's lifeless body. I want to hold him and say goodbye. This relates to the fact that they didn't want to release the body for a period of time afterwards because, well, I mean, I'll let you assess why that might be. Certainly it doesn't make the idea of swift justice look particularly as if it's going to be delivered, does it? But yeah, so they first of all, she was withheld from seeing the body, which some people believe is alarming in and of itself. Then you had what followed up from the attorney, and it said justice for the Finch family constitutes criminal charges against the shooting officer and any other liable officers, as well as damages against the city of Wichita for the policies and practices of its police department. Now, in this report here by the Associated Press, they spoke to a criminologist who said that criminal charges are highly unlikely to be brought against the shooting officer, saying it is a sort of a fact of the world we live in now that it is very difficult to bring charges against police officers unless there is glaring negligence and misconduct. Well, I certainly sympathize with the family, and I think there was probably not the necessary due caution exercised in the incident. I don't know what they're going to. I don't know that they are necessarily going to be very successful in pushing for charges to be brought against the officer. Now, obviously, that guy's got way more experience and insight than me. I think that would be a terrible indictment of the U.S. justice system if an officer who shot an unarmed man answering a fake swatting call wasn't subject to some sort of legal reprisals for killing an unarmed civilian. I mean, maybe I'm being naive. Well, I've talked about this for a long time, and stuff that I've produced, and there's no need to go over it again here. But that's almost the focal point for the victim's family. So that's interesting in and of itself, and maybe that's why some people are backed away from following up the story to where it goes. Now, I did some kind of legal, did some research into sort of the legal ramifications. Where it gets very interesting is they can't even be sure what charges Tyler Barris is going to face. So he is going to Wichita, and I said I'll explain in a moment why that's potentially a good thing for those who want to see justice done. But the first thing you've got to know is because the call crossed state lines, it's a federal case. Now, there is no federal swatting law. There is no federal swatting law. There are some state laws that actually in more savvy states specifically pertain to swatting. Certainly California has one. I can actually show you what happened here. My understanding is that a district attorney who was a victim of a swatting incident himself tried to make the existing legislation a bit more robust. So you can see that here. This is the Senate Bill number 333, Chapter 284, which was approved in 2013. And basically, people of the state of California do enact as follows. And, it's all written up in legalese. But the long and the short of it is that anybody calling in a fake SWAT call or fake emergency services call can spend a year in jail and would have to reimburse the city department up to $10,000 just for responding to the scene. Now, that sounds insane, doesn't it? That sounds insanely light, and indeed, my mind would be boggled that if Tyler Barris was only going to face 1 year in jail. Of course, the reality is that the death is neither here nor there in the swatting incident because there is no specific law for it. Now, what would have to happen is they would have to prove that this was reckless homicide. That's what state authorities might do. With American law, you've got the federal laws and state laws. So if the state authorities decide to go ahead with the prosecution, they may decide to file a reckless homicide charge. A reckless homicide is like, for example, if you were to drop a brick off a bridge into a crowd and it killed somebody, you couldn't say, well, I was intending to kill the person it hit. They would go for reckless homicide. My understanding is reckless homicide can have up to 15 years in prison. But again, it's going to be incredibly difficult for state prosecutors to prove a reckless homicide charge. As well as this, there's a bunch of other laws that would be covered by it, and some of them are really weird. I was very surprised by this. So first of all, this makes sense. Obstruction of justice, any sort of misuse of the police apparently comes under obstruction of justice laws, as well as attempted obstruction of justice, but also wire fraud, because wire fraud is generally used as a catch-all statute for for future technological law breaking that hasn't been anticipated yet. Now, none of these charges have particularly long sentences, and certainly they don't sort of belie the severity of somebody being killed as a result of these actions. And if you look at some of the other previous charges that have been leveled against people who've been involved in swatting, there was a 12-year-old, due to his age, they can't reveal what the charges were leveled against, but this was a boy who swatted Ashton Kutcher, Justin Bieber, way back in 2012. And again, I mean, it just shows how, first of all, how long this has been an issue and it hasn't been dealt with. But second of all, it also shows that there's got to be something in process. You know, like, I can only speak to my own experiences in the UK, but I do know that emergency services are briefed on sort of ways to detect prank calls by the person on the phone asking certain questions and ascertaining the severity of the emergency. How does a 12-year-old boy fool the police into going to Justin Bieber's house and Ashton Kutcher's house in Hollywood? How does that happen? How can you not tell you're talking to a 12-year-old boy? I mean, maybe 12-year-old boys have changed since I was a 12-year-old boy. But this certainly seems insane, and this is why I keep talking about education for the police officers. Give them the tools they need so they're not at the address in the first place with the guns. There's got to be a line, a threshold, before they're sent out, you know? So on top of that, there's a few people who were charged and given prison sentences that are old enough that we can talk about what the sentences they received. This one I managed to find. This is over in Wethersfield. This was put out by the U.S. Attorney's Office. This was a chap who was given 12 months and a day of imprisonment, followed by 3 years of supervised release, as well as 300 hours of community service. This individual had basically kind of called in swatting and bomb threats against Boston University, the Boston Convention and Exhibition Center, some high schools. He was a serial offender. Nobody got hurt. It just wasted a lot of police time, a lot of police resources, a lot of state resources, and he did 1 year. You can see, for example, one of his hoaxes resulted in a 3-hour campus-wide lockdown, required the police and the Connecticut State Police bomb squad to come out, and emergency services unit. So you can imagine, I mean, first of all, not only does this cost the state money, but if there are genuine emergencies that occur during this time, their resources are going to be stretched. That can lead to more deaths. I mean, this is another reason why it's incredibly dangerous. There was another one where it's the longest sentence I was able to find. And it's not, for those hoping for a long sentence for Tyler Barris, it's not going to fill you with lots of hope. So 5 years in prison for somebody called Jason Allen Neff. This was in 2014. And again, multiple swatting incidents, was sentenced to 5 years. So you can see over the course of time, people are starting to take this more and more seriously. I mean, he was a 33-year-old. He definitely doesn't fit the typical profile for somebody that would do something like this. But yeah, and he was sentenced to 5 years, and you can see there were some other people as well that were co-conspirators and whatnot. So now, over in Wichita, one of the things that they have potentially got, and why it's good that he's probably going to be put there, is Wichita have certainly come across things like this before. They're aware of his past. They've got all of that access. So it could be the case, although it's too early to say, it could be the case that actually they're going to be better positioned to give more robust sentencing and for state authorities to go after that reckless homicide charge. So that's what I think everybody's hoping for here. This guy is a serial nuisance. He's done it to multiple people, multiple times. Let's not forget, he claimed responsibility for what happened in Dallas during the Call of Duty World League finals. He's threatening his own grandmother. This guy is undoubtedly a danger to society, a danger to those around him, and I certainly hope that they're going to throw the book. The fact that he's pleading no contest and going to Wichita, I think, is a good start, a step in the right direction to getting this guy off the streets. And a better question is probably, given that he'd engaged in activities like this in the past, why was he out in the first place? I mean, filing restraining orders, threatening his grandmother. It just goes to show that sometimes the justice system doesn't really serve society in the way that it should. People like that who are clearly, it blows my mind. It blows my mind. I can talk about this all day. I'm not going to. But I just wanted to keep you up to date. I'm going to try and follow the trial as much as I can as information comes out. Keep making videos about it, because this story is huge for the gaming scene. Whatever happens to Tyler Barris, we all need to hope that, first of all, it's a super long sentence, an appropriate punishment for what he's done. We need more awareness about swatting in general. If you play games, if you're a streamer, if you're a public figure, if you just care about human life, this is a big deal. It's a big deal to all gamers. So I'm going to keep following the trial as it goes through and keep making videos about it, and just to keep you informed about what's going on. So thanks very much for watching. I hope you're all well. Take care. I'll see you on the next video.